I realize that most of America is perfectly okay convicting Bryan Kohberger on completely circumstantial evidence, and that you'll lose your mind if you think I even make one slight circumstantial connection between Bryan Kohberger and Brent Kopacka. But I'm going to show you the receipts today because once again, I got called out by somebody essentially calling me a liar because I said that Brent Kopacka's family comes from Pennsylvania. I'm going to show you the receipts. I'm going to lay out the biggest argument about why I believe. I'm going to show you all the receipts on why I believe Brent Kopacka and Bryan Kohberger knew each other, and this is the big secret in the Idaho 4 case that they want you to hide. And yes, it's a little bit circumstantial, but you, law enforcement, mainstream media, just convicted a man and made him plead guilty to something based on circumstantial evidence, extremely circumstantial evidence. And I realize that's not a super popular thing to say, but let me tell you this. If any of this stuff was said about Bryan Kohberger that I'm going to share with you today to convict him, you would all be like, hell yeah, that's good information right there. But if I say it saying that you were wrong about Bryan Kohberger, I'm a piece of shit. Let's get into the details. The devil is in the details. Now on the screen, I'm going to show you a user's comment, and I don't even want to necessarily bust this user's nuts, although this user called me out, essentially, in my opinion, calling me a liar. Not in those words. I'm going to tell you how I interpret it based on what I read. This user, and I'm not even going to read their name. You can see it on screen. This is a screenshot from the video that I had where I mentioned Othram Labs tying the DNA sample, the one that America says they got Bryan Kohberger's DNA at the scene. It's DNA is DNA every single day of the week and twice on Sunday, according to Hitler. It's a foregone conclusion. Bryan Kohberger was placed at that house with the DNA. No, he freaking wasn't. He was not. You guys need to learn how to listen carefully. The prosecution told you they weren't going to use the DNA evidence. They weren't going to rely on it. They didn't want to have to show you how they got to it because how they got to it was sketchy as F. And how Othram Labs got to Kohberger wasn't his DNA. It was 4 brothers in Pennsylvania, which I told you I thought was Brent Kopacka and his 3 brothers, and I'm going to show you the receipts why. And I'm going to bust this user's nuts who's telling me, you're a piece of shit, DA. Again, he didn't say that. What he said was, there's no proof of what I said. So here's what he actually said. I hate to break everyone's heart, but Brent has no family in Pennsylvania. There is 0 proof that he lived there. There are some Kopackas, but none related to Brent. And he had never had an address there. And all of these people's addresses are from people from Illinois over to Washington State. So there you go. Flat out calling me out, essentially calling me a liar. Nobody in Brent Kopacka's family is from Pennsylvania. I'm a liar. Let me give you another piece of that attack that came from this user. And in some regards, I think he said, like, you're taking it the wrong way. I'm not trying to be an ass. I think he's kind of said. But when you say you're wrong and there's no connection between Brent Kopacka and Pennsylvania, I have to defend that. So here's the other part he said. Listen to this. This same user lists Brent Kopacka's family. His mother, Darcy Nixon. Stepfather, David Nixon. Father, John F. Kopacka. Stepmother, Dawn M. Kopacka. Siblings, Tori Davy, Zachary, Ethan, Evan, and Elowen Kopacka. By the way, there are your 4 brothers. There's Zachary, Ethan, and Evan. That's 3 males. And then you got Brent Kopacka. That's the 4 brothers that I say is from Pennsylvania. This user says, as he continues, all listed addresses and the records tie them to Washington, Colorado, Tennessee, Illinois, and Oklahoma. 0 hits from Pennsylvania. Okay, I have to defend myself, and I'm not trying to attack this user. What I want to do is I want to explain to you how freaking close-minded everyone in America is. Circumstantial evidence convicted Bryan Kohberger. His phone pinged off the cell tower that services the house at 1122 King Road residence, and that was enough proof to you that he was stalking the girls. Even though they flat out said, we don't believe he was stalking the girls. They had to admit in court he was not stalking the girls. They had to admit in court there's no connection between him and the girls. Bill Thompson got up in front of the entire world and announced that they can't place Bryan Kohberger in the house. You think they placed him in the house due to DNA. Holy shit, America. If you're still holding on to the idea that Bryan Kohberger was found guilty because they had all the evidence to prove it, they had him in the house. They did not. Bill Thompson said they can't place him in the house. They can only place him near the house based on the fact that his phone pinged off the cell tower that services the house at 112 King Road residence. It doesn't even mean that he was at the house. Now, let's set aside the whole why to launch her thing. And I realize I'm getting ahead of myself. What I'm saying is a lot of you in America convicted Bryan Kohberger on circumstantial evidence that is loosely like maybe his phone was in the area a bunch of times. That must mean he's stalking them. DNA evidence that linked to 4 people that went up a family tree and down another family tree and somehow got to then led to a potentially high probability that's the father of Bryan Kohberger. That all to you was 100% proof that Bryan Kohberger was the killer in this case, even though that's all circumstantial evidence. And even the prosecution wasn't going to try to use that DNA evidence at trial because they knew there was a problem with it. And I say something like, by the way, I tend to think the shooting of Brent Kopacka, someone who I think was living in Pennsylvania at the same time as Kohberger and knew Kohberger, but I can't 100% prove it. You guys bust my nuts and say there's no proof whatsoever. And this person will say none of Kopacka's family comes from Pennsylvania. I'm going to show you not only that they came from Pennsylvania, I'm going to show you how I think Brent Kopacka and Bryan Kohberger met each other. I'm going to show you where, and I'm going to give you all the receipts. And it's going to be a little, for your opinion, it's going to be a little speculative. And again, if you're a Kohberger guilter kind of person, you won't give a shit. Oh my God, devil's advocate, that's pure speculation, which is the same thing. That's circumstantial evidence. Yes, circumstantial evidence convicted Bryan Kohberger in this case. Now, okay, he pled guilty. Why? Because you had overwhelming circumstantial evidence that convinced him he was going to be executed and killed if he didn't plead guilty, and so he pled guilty. But let's set that aside. Let's deal with the $1 million thing. Brent Kopacka's family, who I fucking listed right here for you, Darcy Nixon, John Kopacka, and his brothers, all listed right there. You've flat out admitted that's his family. And you say there's 0 hits in Pennsylvania. This guy's a liar, is essentially what you're saying. Now, again, you didn't call me a liar, but when you say there's no proof whatsoever that his family was in Pennsylvania, you're saying I'm a liar. Let's take a look at Brent Kopacka's obituary. Now, this may be a little hard to see on screen, so I apologize for that. I'm going to lean forward a little bit and read this. This is the obituary of Brent Lee Kopacka. In here, it says Brent was born on October 4th, 1986, right? Survived by his mother, Darcy Nixon. Okay, all right. And his stepfather, David Nixon, and his father, John Kopacka, and his stepmother, Dawn Kopacka. All the names this guy listed. Brent was the oldest of siblings. Tori, Davy, Zachary, Ethan, Evan, Elowen. Okay, so again, there's the brothers and sisters, but we're focused on the brothers because Author and Lab said they got a connection to 4 brothers from Pennsylvania. And this guy's saying these guys were never in Pennsylvania, so I'm full of shit. It's all circumstantial. The last thing I want to point out in this highlighted section is just one item down below. Let's say for a moment that I'm going to prove to you everything that I just said, that these guys do come from Pennsylvania. There's a connection or a proof that they were in Pennsylvania. This last sentence says that Brent made friends everywhere he went and he stayed in touch with people that he met. So if Brent Kopacka met Bryan Kohberger in Pennsylvania, according to this own obituary, Brent Kopacka made friends with everyone everywhere he went. So if he ended up in Pennsylvania and he did meet Bryan and Amanda Kohberger, which I'm going to tell you why I think that they did meet, then and it says right there, he makes friends easy and he stays in touch with his friends. So it is a surprise. Is it a surprise if Bryan Kohberger you're going to say, oh my God, devil's advocate, it's so circumstantial evidence. Fucking watch. This is stronger circumstantial evidence than you had on Bryan Kohberger's phone pinging off the tower that services the house at 112 King Road residence, which is horrendously less than what I'm going to give you right now. But I know you're not going to see it that way. So this is for the people that are like, oh my God, dude, I knew you were right about this. I want to watch. That's for you. Because there are people who already believe that the case is done, solved because he pled guilty. You checked out a long time ago. But it's also for this guy who's saying I'm a liar, and it's for anybody who thinks that guy might be right. The devil's advocates just lied. The Kopackas aren't from Pennsylvania. All right, so here we go. This is from a court document that's been filed. You see the stamp February 19th, 2025. As documents are becoming unsealed, unredacted, we get pieces of information. This is from the Bryan Kohberger trial and the court papers. This is the order on the defendant's motion to suppress genetic information. Right. So this is the order for the defendant's motion to suppress. The defendants is trying to suppress the IgG information, which they said was horseshit, didn't lead to Bryan Kohberger. Ann Taylor also said that Bryan Kohberger that might have been fingered because evidence was planted on him at the crime scene. And I just did a really big video, planted evidence in Idaho 4. If you haven't seen it, go watch that. You might want to watch that before this evidence. I said, I know now why Ann Taylor said that the knife sheath was planted. I know why she thinks it is, because they lied. And oh my God, like I can't suppress my energy. They lied to you about everything. We didn't know about Bryan Kohberger until December 19th. Fuck, you did. You knew about him on December 5th. That came out in the documents. And Ann Taylor knew you knew about him on the 5th of December. And you lied and said you didn't know about it on the 19th. And I know in America, if you're a guilter, you're like, who cares? Who cares, DA? You know what? They actually knew about Kohberger before June. You can tell me any freaking day you want on how long they knew Bryan Kohberger's name. The fact is, on the record, in the court documents that I showed you, Brett Payne, the lead detective, said, never heard of Bryan Kohberger until the December 19th. That is a lie. Some people call that perjury because it's in the documents that they did know about him on the 5th of December. And some of you are even saying that they knew of him before this, that they knew of him in June of that year. If you are right and I'm wrong, and they knew about him from June and I'm the asshole for not really, they knew about him for a long time, devil's advocates, then why the fuck in the court documents do they tell you we only heard about this guy's name for the first time on the 19th of December? That's a lie. That's perjury. Some people can go to jail for that. So will it happen? Of course not, because you guys have all been sold the line of bullshit and you're not going to hold anybody accountable. But that could be considered perjury, in my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. All of this is opinions, and I'm a little fired up because I'm a little bit mad being called a liar when this evidence is stronger than the evidence that they had against Bryan Kohberger. All right, so this is again from the document, stamped February 19, 2025, order on the defendant's motion to suppress. We're going to go through another slide. This is the part we want to focus on. The Idaho State Police delivered Q1.1 to Othram Labs on November 22nd, 2022. This is I believe, the sample that they're going to tie to Bryan Kohberger off the knife sheath. A picogram, freaking something the size of a grain of sand that you cannot see with a human eye. That's what they did to convict Bryan Kohberger. But listen. Idaho State Police delivered Q1.1 to Othram on November 22nd. Othram developed an SNP profile from Q1.1 and searched Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch Pro. This work revealed 4 brothers of interest, all of whom were low matches to Q1.1. Stop. Full stop. What you're going to find out here, oh, by the way, it's in the footnote. Look below. The footnote that's highlighted. These brothers do not have the defendant's last name. None of those were Kohbergers. The DNA sample that Othram Lab developed was to 4 brothers that were not Kohberger. Later at CrimeCon, and I was trying to find a good document to prove it to you, but at CrimeCon, Othram Labs, one of the middlemen, got up on the stage and told everybody that the DNA led to 4 brothers in Pennsylvania, and that led us to Kohberger. And everybody cheered and clapped. Oh my God, 4 brothers in Pennsylvania is what she said. Now I'm trying to prove to you it was from Pennsylvania, but that's where they're going. They already admitted it led to 4 brothers, none of them with the last name Kohberger, and it was from Pennsylvania. Is the part that I can't show in this document, but I assure you that's where it was from. And from there, once they got to Pennsylvania and 4 brothers in Pennsylvania, which none of them had the name Kohberger, they went up the family tree till they found a common ancestor, moved over and came back down to Kohberger, who they already knew was their guy. They already had Bryan Kohberger fingered for this. They just needed to be able to make some kind of connection. So that's what I'm telling you is the key problem here. It's not like they developed the DNA and said, oh, by the way, the DNA is this guy named Bryan Kohberger. Let's now go look to see if he did it. Oh, yeah, he did it. No, it's like, we believe Bryan Kohberger did it. How do we get him placed in the house? Oh, we got DNA from 4 brothers. That's not a Kohberger. Shit. How do we get that to Bryan Kohberger so we can get an arrest, warrant? Oh, let's work up the family tree to find a common ancestor, move it over and come down a completely different family tree to get the Kohberger. And then we just won't tell the magistrate how we got there. We'll just say it was an FBI tip. From a tip, the tip was 4 brothers in Pennsylvania, who this guy's telling me weren't the Kopackas because no Kopacka ever lived in Pennsylvania. So let's go. By the way, the brothers, I'm going to get that there's another highlight down lower in this second box that I've got kind of broken out. This page 2 of this document, or the next page of the document. The brother, so it says, Othram asked the Idaho State Police to contact one of the identified brothers to provide DNA samples to upload into either of their 2 databases. Despite Idaho State Police's request, the contacted brothers declined to provide a sample. Let me tell you this. There's indication one of Brent Kopacka's brothers, who I would say may be tied to Pennsylvania, and I'm going to show you the receipts, was in Pullman area as well. There's a reference I'm going to show you that one of his brothers Zach was in Pullman, Washington as well. So one of the brothers was contacted. Was it Zach? Probably, to say, could you please provide some DNA? I'm telling you, I got a document that's going to suggest that Zach, Brent Kopacka's brother, was in Pullman. They reached out to one of the 4 brothers, which I think is Zach, and they wanted a DNA sample. And he basically told him to pack sand, not going to provide you DNA sample. So again, Circumstantial, sir. Circumstantial, you can't prove that. Yeah, so you also can't prove that pinging off the cell tower that services the house at 112 King Road residence places Bryan Kohberger at the house, which is why Bill Thompson said we can't place Bryan Kohberger at the house. But you all fucking bought it anyways, didn't you? So you're okay with circumstantial evidence if it convicts the guy you want to convict. You're completely okay with circumstantial evidence when it convicts the guy you want to convict, but you don't want to have any fucking part of Brent Kopacka. I'm an asshole for mentioning it. Leave that family alone. They're innocent. Wait, what if Bryan Kohberger was innocent? This is stronger than the evidence against Kohberger. Listen to this. Listen. On December 10th, 2022, members of law enforcement, including the FBI, had a meeting to discuss Othram Labs' work. Let me pay attention to the significance. Othram Labs still did not tie this to Bryan Kohberger. Othram Labs on the 10th basically came to the FBI and said, we got 4 brothers that don't have the last name Kohberger, and we've asked for one of the brothers, probably Zach, in my opinion. It's totally opinion. Maybe it was Brent himself, but it could have been Brent himself because he hadn't been shot and killed at this point. And they said to pack sand. They're not going to turn over DNA to the database. So the FBI decided to do their own investigative work, and somehow they got to Bryan Kohberger. They don't want to tell you how they did it. They tell you it's law enforcement secrets. It's something they don't plan. They never planned to reveal in court. They didn't want to show a jury how they got there, because how they got there, if a jury would have seen how they got to Bryan Kohberger, they never would have believed it. It starts with, in my opinion, in the video that I told you before about planted evidence, it starts with they already had Bryan Kohberger on their radar. They already thought Bryan Kohberger was the killer. They just needed to place him in the house, and they couldn't. They couldn't place him in the house with the circumstantial fucking videos of the white Elantra. They couldn't place him in the house from the circumstantial pinging up the cell phone tower that services the house at 112 King Road. So they needed to place him in the house. So DNA evidence was one way to do it. Another way to do it was to lean on a CI or learn on Molly McMichaels, the DoorDash driver, who sat silent for forever to say, oh, by the way, I saw Bryan Kohberger that night. And that fell to shit at the last minute. But they were going to bring her on to say, I saw Bryan Kohberger there. They were doing everything they could to prove Bryan Kohberger was at the house, and ultimately had to tell you on the stand, but none of you are fucking listening in America, it seems like. Okay, none of you is not true, because those watching the channel, you do pay attention. But if you're just driving by and you've turned this off, you're not hearing the message, which is that they flat out told you. They flat out told you. Molly didn't see him there. You saw in the later documents, you found out Molly never saw Bryan Kohberger there. But she was telling you, oh, I'm friends with Bill Thompson, and now I have to go testify saying I saw Bryan Kohberger at the house. They were doing everything they could in the prosecution to put Bryan Kohberger in the house, and they still couldn't, even when they were leaning on somebody to give false testimony, in my opinion. Even when they were using DNA evidence that they didn't want to show you how they got to it, because they already believed Bryan Kohberger was the killer. They just needed to place him in the house. So they tried to place him there with an eyewitness that wasn't true. They tried to place him in there with planted DNA, which wasn't true. And then neither one of those things they wanted to show at trial, so we didn't have a trial. They put pressure on Kohberger to do a plea deal so there would never be a trial, so they'd never have to show their work. And Taylor knew if they showed their work, they were fucked. She knew it. She was laying the trap down for Payne when she said, so the first time you heard of Bryan Kohberger was on the 19th? I know I'm getting along. And if you heard all this, it's extra. Let's get moving. I got new stuff to show you, and I'm repeating stuff for the peanut gallery who may be hearing this for the first time. All right. Now, the same day, Othram was instructed to stop work and turn over the SMP profile and search results to the Idaho State Police. Othram did so along with the preliminary report of its findings. The preliminary report did not contain any medical information associated with the SMP profile. So on the 10th, Othram Labs did not develop the lead to Bryan Kohberger. By the way, the FBI was co-located with MPD 4 weeks before December 19th, when they gave MPD the name Bryan Kohberger. For weeks, they were embedded. I believe documents show MPD knew Bryan Kohberger's name was associated with this case from the 5th of December. And some of you just don't get it, why that's important. You just don't get it, because they already knew who they wanted before they found the mysterious lead tying Kohberger to the DNA. The DNA did not lead to Kohberger, and then they made the proof. They already knew who they wanted. The DNA just didn't match. In fact, it went to 4 brothers that wasn't Kohberger, and they did some machinations, some maneuvering of the data to play shell games to get it to Kohberger, because they believed it was Kohberger. So they needed to get it there, and they did get it there. And then they told you, we never intend to show our work in court. We don't intend to rely on it. Why? Because we have enough circumstantial evidence that we don't have to show you the DNA evidence. If you weren't listening to this, you are freaking so head up your ass, I can't even believe it. You're not listening. They didn't have him. It was a circumstantial case. Even Hitler, who wasn't giving Kohberger a fair trial, even Hitler said, I want you to know what they would have had to have proven, and I want you to hear what they would prove. And then ultimately what they would prove is they said, we can't place Kohberger in the house. Even with the DNA, they can't place him in the house. And yet there's so many people that say Bryan Kohberger was placed in the house. Okay, I know I'm hitting it too long. Let's get to the 100%, in my opinion, receipts. Nobody in Bryan Kohberger's family comes from Pennsylvania. DA, you're a fucking liar. Okay, you didn't say it in those words. Why do I not have the parental advisory label on here? Fuck, I should. When I rant like this should have been on here a long time ago. Right in the corner, parental advisory, because that should have been on there from the beginning, because anytime I talk about this subject at this level, I'm mad and I'm going to say a lot of F-bombs. All right. Brent Lee Kopacka, age of death, age at death, age 36. This is the person that is shot and killed on December 19th in Pullman, Washington, that many people believe was associated with the crime at 1122 King Road residence. In fact, Brent Kopacka was not an Army Ranger. He was an Army paratrooper. However, paratroopers are an elite, no, not elite. Yeah, an elite force. They're not Rangers, but they often train with Rangers. Why is that important? I'm going to show you why it's important coming up later in this document. So while there's no proof, there's also no proof that he wasn't. There's no proof Brent Lee Kopacka was a Ranger. He was a paratrooper in a combat division, trained in survival, trained in knife fighting, saw shit and got PTSD, according to the obituary. I had that on the screen earlier. If you want to read the obituary, you'll see he struggled with PTSD, and he saw shit that scarred him for life. He had emotional problems from what he saw. He was trained in dropping as a paratrooper behind enemy lines and saw some shit and was trained to kill people. So when people say, hey, look, wouldn't a Brent Kopacka be more the kind of person who could kill 4 people in 8 minutes with a knife? Yeah, a trained paratrooper trained in knife fighting. And I showed the documents. I've got full documents showing you what they were trained in exactly and how a person is attacked and what you attack, what arteries you attacked, and how you work with a knife. I showed all of those things. But again, you're like, circumstantial evidence, DA, that's completely circumstantial. So what if he was trained with a knife? It doesn't mean he did it. But yet, you assholes will glom on to an article that said Bryan Kohberger as a teenager once worked at a fish market and flayed fish as proof that he knows how to cut up 4 people in 8 minutes because he knew how to flay fish. First of all, go screw yourself. That article itself, if you even took 2 seconds to research it, you'll find out that the manager who was quoted in that said Bryan Kohberger didn't work there long enough to learn how to flay fish. But the media glommed all over it. Look, this is where Bryan Kohberger learned his skills to kill 4 people in 8 minutes because he could flay fish. But DA is a fucking asshole for talking about a paratrooper trained in knife fighting and how to slam people against the wall and cut arteries in the leg to dismember people as quickly as possible. That couldn't that's completely circumstantial bullshit. You should be held. I hope somebody sues your ass, DA, for defamation of character. But you know what? Flaying fish is fucking proof Kohberger was a killer of 8 people in 8 minutes because he could flay fish. He never even learned how to flay fish. Do some research, for fuck's sake. Quit looking at the stupid narrative and do a little bit of research. He didn't work there long enough to learn how to flay fish. There was no evidence he learned how to flay fish at all. And even if he knew how to flay a fish, there's a big difference between flaying fish and knowing how to cut somebody's artery to kill somebody in a quick amount of time. You know who does know how to do that kind of stuff? Somebody trained in knife fighting combat skills as a paratrooper in elite forces. All right. Yes, I'm on a rant. Brent Kopacka, age of death. This is Brent Lee Kopacka, age of death, 36. Okay, let's move on. Brent Lee Kopacka, who is his possible relative? This is coming, by the way, from searchpublicrecords.com. You can find it yourself, searchpublicrecords.com. Who is his parents? Darcy Teresa Nixon, first relation. That's his mother. John Kopacka, first relation. That's his father. Guess what? The person who called me out saying I'm a liar, that this family doesn't come from Pennsylvania, said, by the way, devil's advocates, his mother is Darcy Nixon and his father is John Kopacka. I fucking got it. It's right there. I can see it. Did you look at the next page? Let's look at the next page. By the way, possible email addresses associated with Darcy Nixon or Darcy Kopacka. Possible email addresses associated with her. Look who's on the list. B. Kopacka. Brent Kopacka at msn.com is one of the addresses, including Brent, including B. Kopacka at gmail.com, Brent Kopacka at eke out or whatever, eck out, look. Anyways, point being, a whole bunch of Brent, her son's email addresses is associated with her. Could that mean Brent Kopacka lived with his mother at some point, that her son's email addresses are associated with her, Darcy Nixon? Okay, do we have them in Pennsylvania yet? You will. You're going to have them in Pennsylvania right here. All right, check this out. Darcy Nixon, Pierce, Idaho has got her address, age 60. Darcy Nixon, you can see possible aliases. She's known as Darcy Nixon. She's known as Darcy Therese Nixon. She's known as Darcy Kopacka. She's known as Darcy Teresa Kopacka. Great. Let's look at the next page. Addresses known to live. Right there. Are you freaking seeing it right there? Williamsport, Pennsylvania, from the years of 2010 to 11. Another from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, from 2008 to 2002. Two locations over their course of 4 years where they were living in Pennsylvania at the same time the Kohbergers were. Mr. Devil's Advocates, there's no proof that family comes from Pennsylvania. Well, let's put the math together. His fucking mother comes from Pennsylvania. You can see the houses they own. So there's his mother in Pennsylvania. By the way, Brent Kopacka, right about this time, would have just gotten out of the military. There's a strong chance that when you just got out of the military and you don't have your feet, and circumstantial, I get it. It's circumstantial. I get it. So, but I bet you when you first got out of the military in 2009/10 period, the first thing you do is you go back and you live with your mom for a while where you get your feet on the ground. But I can't prove that. I've always told you I can't 100% prove, but I can put the fucking family in Pennsylvania at the same time in the same general location as the Kohbergers. And I told you I could, but this guy, no, you can't, Mr. Devil's Advocate. You're a liar. You're a liar. That family never came from Pennsylvania. Well, there's Darcy. In multiple locations. That's the mother of Kopacka, or Brent Kopacka, in Pennsylvania at the same time the Kohbergers are there. And again, possible email addresses associated, Brent Kopacka. So let's look at Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger, here's his information. There he is from Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. So now you got Kohberger and you got Kopacka's mother in in Pennsylvania. Both of them in Pennsylvania, but the times match up. Fuck yeah, they match up. So first of all, here's just some examples. Here's Albright, Pennsylvania. Here's some dates. Let's look down at Effort, Pennsylvania, 1995 to 2011. Again, Darcy was in there from 2008 to 2011. Here we've got some overlap. Effort, Pennsylvania, 1995 to 2011. Effort, Pennsylvania from 94 to 2012. How about Albrightsville, Pennsylvania from 2012 to 14? Albrightsville from 2013 to 14. You've got the Kohbergers all over Pennsylvania. Now, granted, how far away are these? About an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at one place. I'll show the receipts. But again, can I prove that they knew each other? No. But what I can prove is you're an asshole if you say Devil's Advocates is a lie. There's absolutely no proof that family was in Pennsylvania. Yeah, there is proof that they're in Pennsylvania. At least his mother and his father were in Pennsylvania. I can show you that. By the way, here's a little thing. Williamsport, Pennsylvania is the address where Darcy Nixon and her husband, I believe, was that, and where likely even Brent Kopacka would have been when he came back from the military and probably stayed with his parents. But that's speculation. It's no worse speculation than Bryan Kohberger's phone pinged off the cell tower that services the house at 112 King Road residence. But some of you will say, oh yeah, you're reaching for straws. Just because these guys were in Pennsylvania. Well, a minute ago, you told me they weren't in Pennsylvania together. So now I've got them in Pennsylvania again. And I cannot 100% prove to you that Brent Kopacka was in there, but I can prove his family was, which you just told me his family isn't even from Pennsylvania. And I can show you that they did own houses in Pennsylvania at the same time the Kohbergers were there. And here we are. That's where Kohberger in Albrightsville was living when he was arrested. There's Williamsport. That drive, did they list the time on there? I want to say that's about 2 hours, but I can't remember if I have that on there. But let's go through some of those other circumstantial receipts tying these two together. And I'm going to show you where I think they met. I'm going to show you where I think they met. It is circumstantial. It is a guess. But again, Bryan Kohberger was convicted on circumstantial evidence, or he pled guilty on circumstantial evidence because you were going to execute him on circumstantial evidence. So if you like circumstantial evidence, like you apparently do, if you're a believer that Bryan Kohberger is guilty, you love circumstantial evidence. Let me give you fucking lots of circumstantial evidence on how these guys met each other and how they knew each other and why it's a big cover-up. In my opinion, just like it was the prosecution's opinion that Bryan Kohberger killed 4 people in 8 minutes because he could flay fish. Okay, hold on. Bryan Kohberger was born in November 21st, 1994. In 2011, now why is 2011 important? 2011 is the time that we know Darcy Nixon Brent Kopacka's mom was living there. We know that Kopacka, and I'm going to show the receipts, just got out of the military around that time. Probably, I'm going to speculate, went and spent some time with his mom. This is how I'm going to say that this could have all happened. And right around that time, Amanda Kohberger, Bryan Kohberger's sister, starred in a film called 2 Days Back. It was a slasher horror film where a bunch of college kids get slashed and cut up. I'm not making that shit up. You should know that by now. I have a whole video called The Horror Game Theory, where I first started to lay together the idea that I think Brent Kopacka and Amanda Kohberger met each other, and Bryan Kohberger met each other all through the horror film genre, because they were horror films. Brent Kopacka and his friends were horror film fans. I'm going to show receipts on that in case you think I'm fucking full of shit. I'm going to show you receipts. Take it or leave it. If you don't like circumstantial evidence, don't convict Bryan Kohberger. If you do love circumstantial evidence, because that's how you convicted Kohberger, then you should love this. So let's get to it. All right. So 2 Days Back, Amanda Kohberger starred in that in 2011, or it was filmed in 2011. An article says that the film was shot in 2011. Again, this is right after Kopacka got out of the military. And so the question becomes, one, can we prove the movie was shot and Amanda was from Pennsylvania and the movie was shot in Pennsylvania? Yes, we can. Can we prove that Kopacka's family was living in Pennsylvania at the time? Yes, we can. Are they within a couple hours of each other or less than a couple of hours each other in Pennsylvania? Yes, we can prove that. So the only thing I can't prove definitively is that Kopacka knew Amanda. However, Brent Kopacka is only 2 years older than Amanda. They're roughly the same age. At this time in 2011, when Brent Kopacka was like, what was he, 27, and maybe she's 25, something like that. Amanda Kohberger was 25 and he was 27, something like that. Bryan Kohberger was 17 years old. He was in high school. Guess what we're going to show receipts on? Bryan Kohberger at this time becomes obsessed with becoming an Army Ranger. Oh, that's fucking interesting. So Bryan Kohberger suddenly has an obsession with wanting to become an Army Ranger. Guess who's in the picture in my circumstantial case? Brent Kopacka, who just got out of the Army Ranger, or not Army Rangers, the Army paratroopers. And again, they would have trained with Rangers. And it's like saying, like, I know somebody in the military, but I want to be the cream of the crop. So I want to be, a SEAL. So if I had a friend that's if I had a friend who's in the Navy and I wanted to, and I'm inspired by somebody in the Navy, I might be like, not only do I want to go to the Navy, but I want to be a SEAL. Just because your friend wasn't a SEAL doesn't mean that you weren't inspired by your friend to become a Navy SEAL. I'm arguing the same kind of circumstantial logic can happen here. If Brent Kopacka was in the Army as a paratrooper and trained with Rangers, maybe this inspired Bryan Kohberger as a young 17-year-old male whose sister was in a horror film and maybe knew this guy named Brent Kopacka, a recent retiree or exiting person out of the military who was a paratrooper and was a badass in combat and all this stuff like that. Maybe Bryan Kohberger looked up to this guy and was like, not only do I want to be in the Army like this guy, but I want to be a Ranger. I want to take it to the next level up. I want to be a Ranger. So again, speculative, yes. Circumstantial, yes. Not any less so than what we convicted somebody on, but in my opinion. So an article states that it was shot, the film was 2 days back, which is a horror film with Amanda Kohberger, was shot in 2011. Amanda Kohberger was born in 1988. So that puts her around in her 20s, like, again, 2 years younger than Brent Kopacka, which the reason I bring that up is because they would have been about the same age. Did they walk in the same circles? Well, Amanda Kohberger is into horror films. She actually applied to be in a horror film. The Kopackas and his best friend, Darren Duncan, are big into horror films. Is it that much of a stretch of a logic for you that these people all from Pennsylvania who are into horror films might have met each other if Amanda Kohberger is starring in a horror film in an area where the bunch of guys are fans of horror films? Is that really that much? Is that so much of a stretch to you that I'm just completely pulling shit out of my ass and I've got nothing here to pay attention to? And if so, I suppose you don't then think there's anything to the idea that Bryan Kohberger's cell phone pinged off the cell tower that services the house at 112 TQ residence 22 times, because that's just circumstantial like this. Brent Lee Kopacka was born in 86. So again, let's go back. Amanda, born in 88. Kopacka, 86. He's a couple years older. In 2011, Kopacka would have been 25 years old. So actually, Amanda would have been 23 years old at that time. So I was a little off on the ages. Point being, they're only 2 years apart, and they're roughly the same age. So again, of course, just because they're of the same relative age doesn't mean they know each other. But it's starting to piece the pieces together. I'm telling you, it's a story, it's a narrative. Okay. And it's no different than the narrative the mainstream media and Dateline, NBC, and every fucking AMC and every channel in America did their speculative, this is why we think Bryan Kohberger probably went to the Mad Greek restaurant, and maybe he saw Maddie working there, and maybe he became obsessed, and maybe he decided that she was pretty and he couldn't have her, and therefore that led him to decide that he's going to kill all 4 of those girls because she represented something he couldn't have. Somehow that's okay with you, that whole logic jump. That maybe he went to the restaurant with no proof that he did, and maybe he saw her, which is no proof that he did, and maybe he decided he couldn't have her, which is no proof that he couldn't, and that led him to kill 4 people. That was okay with you. For a lot of you in America, that was a perfectly logical conclusion of steps. Yeah, I even heard somebody in the steps of his, when he was changing his plea, I had somebody in the media right next to me from AP News tell another person, actually from Fox News, tell somebody from AP News, yeah, Bryan Kohberger was stalking one of the girls. He met her at Mad Greek restaurant and he became obsessed with her. No, that was a narrative that you apparently bought hook, line, and sinker. You bought it hook, line, and sinker. But I'm an asshole for telling you this story that I think makes more sense to me. Brent Kopacka just got out of the military. He's obsessed with the horror films. Him and his friends are obsessed with horror films. Amanda Kohberger is starring in, just got from a college in the Pennsylvania area, very within an hour and a half of the area where his mom lives, Brent Kopacka's mom lives, and she's starring in a horror film. Could one make the logical conclusion that maybe they could have met each other? According to his obituary, Brent Lee Kopacka served in the Army from 2005 to 2009 in the 2nd Battalion, 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 4th Brigade Combat Team in the 82nd Airborne Division. This is again proof that he was an Army paratrooper, which is an elite not special forces, but elite forces, and Rangers train with them all the time. So did Kopacka, through his association with his sister in the horror film, meet Brent Kopacka? Is that a possible scenario? And if so, as a new recent badass returning from the war in Afghanistan, did he say, I want to be a Ranger? Is that so hard? Is that an asshole? Just a question. Again, let me be sure I'm going to make sure you're clear, because some of you might think I'm saying this is definitive proof. No. What I'm saying is not definitive proof. What I'm saying is the story that I'm telling you and the dots that I'm connecting is no less convincing, in my opinion, than the story of Bryan Kohberger, because a white car passed by the camera, that it must be Bryan Kohberger's car. And because a cell phone tower pinged it a bunch of times, that means he was stalking the girls. This is no less circumstantial evidence than that. And it's a better story. According to the director of 2 Days Back, the film was made while he was a student while he was a student, and Amanda was cast after an open audition. She was at a college campus in Pennsylvania and applied to be part of this Pennsylvania horror film being shot in Pennsylvania. Multiple sources say that as of recent years, Amanda worked at a school as a school counselor in Pennsylvania. Okay, so 2 Days Back was a Penn State Mont Alto student film. Amanda Kohberger is listed as an ESU by ESU as graduating with a BS in psychology. Same thing. Same thing Bryan Kohberger goes into. She went into psychology. Bryan Kohberger was going into psychology. He changed his major to criminology partway through, but the family was interested in psychology. So here we go. If Amanda Kohberger somehow knew Brent Kopacka, and she's into psychology and Bryan's into psychology, you got connections. Amanda Kohberger's into the horror film. Brent Kopacka and his friends are into horror films. Is this fucking that hard for you to even contemplate? To just contemplate that there's something here and that we were lied to about Brent Kopacka. Why was his phone wiped? Because they didn't want you to make the connection. They didn't want people to find out that there was a connection between the Kopackas and the Kohbergers. They didn't want you to do that. Why? Because I believe early on in the investigation, they believed Kopacka and Kohberger were involved. Do you remember? I know some of you do, and you bring it up all the time, but I'm going to hit it again. I know I'm all over the place. Judge, the first judge involved. The first judge involved in the Idaho 4 case literally said Brent Kopacka's name when referring to Kohberger because he fucked it up. Why? Because I 100% believe both of their names are side by side on paperwork. We've seen it. The paperwork that I showed the other day in my video that the evidence was planted showed suspect 1, redacted name we don't get to see. Suspect 2, Bryan Kohberger. I think the 2 suspects are Brent Kopacka and Bryan Kohberger. They thought those 2 guys were together. The problem is they done fucked up when they killed Bryan Brent Kopacka a month after the murders, and then they were left with only one guy to prosecute, which was Kohberger. Problem is, they couldn't put Kohberger in the house. So what they did is they did some genetic manipulation. They moved up a family tree from Kohberger and made it go over from Kopacka's family. It made it to go over to Kohberger, and then said, we don't want to explain to you how we got there. Factory wiped Kopacka's phone when they killed him because they didn't want you to find out that these two were related. They're hiding something. I know that sounds completely crazy. I get it. By the way, I thank God that this stuff's on the internet, because this is literally the kind of stuff that signs your death warrant. If I could prove, the one thing I told you I can't prove is I can't prove definitively. I cannot prove definitively Bryan Kohberger and Brent Kopacka knew each other. If I did, I'd probably be a dead man. If I was the only one who could prove it to you, I'd probably be a dead man. And I'm not kidding. I would probably be signing my own death warrant if I could actually somehow prove to you definitively with receipts that the two of each other knew each other. Right now, I'm just an asshole talking. So that's the only thing keeping me alive, probably. And I'm not kidding about that. Like, there's a paranoia level that says if I could prove this to you and I'm one of the only ones that can do it, I'm in deep shit. So thank God, in a way, I can't prove it to you. I can only tell you a story. And therefore, I'm just a storyteller, and you can keep calling me an asshole and just ignore the story. If I could prove it to you, I'd probably be dead. All right, that's my opinion. So let's go on. So we know that she graduated in 2012. She was there from 2010 to 2011. The film 2 Days Back was shot in 2011. This was shortly after Kopacka got out of the military, and his mother lived in Pennsylvania at that time. I feel like I've already showed you the receipts, so hope you're staying with it. She also went to Northampton Community College, NCC, located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Northampton is listed as one of the locations where Amanda Kohberger went. So if Amanda Kohberger attended NCC before transferring to East Stroudsburg University, ESU, which we talked about earlier, she would have studied in either Bethlehem or Tannersville, both in eastern Pennsylvania, about 20 to 25 miles from East Stroudsburg. So what am I going with all that? Well, it's just that it puts Amanda going to colleges around that area, getting into a movie about horror films around that area, same places that Kohberger went to college, because Kohberger also went to the same Northampton Community College. Here's the ChatGPT answer. Did Bryan Kohberger go to Northampton Community College? Yes. According to multiple credible news sources, Bryan Kohberger did attend Northampton Community College in Pennsylvania and received an associate's degree in psychology like his sister in 2018. Okay. Now, that's enough for that. That was a slide showing I was going to talk about Tyler Robinson on my live. We're going to put that aside for a minute, and now we're going to show some other things on screen. So let me see if I can pull this up for you. Let's see. Go here. Let's minimize this. All right. Let's show you a few more receipts. Hopefully my highlights work. This is an article, and of course my highlights aren't going to work. Why the hell do they not work? So I'm going to have to find it for you. Sister of accused Idaho killer Bryan Kohberger starred in a slasher horror film. I'm going to zoom this in as much as possible so you can see it on screen as best as possible. Okay, so the sister of the suspected killer starred in a horror film. She was known as Lori in the 2011 horror film. Again, this is right around the time. Again, Darcy Nixon, Brent Kopacka's mom, is in that, and we know she's in Pennsylvania with the house at this time that this film is being made. According to the film, it's a 96-minute film focused on a group of young adults who trek through the woods and end up a mountain to catch forestry students suspected of illegal forestering. Many of the characters in the movie meet grisly ends, often resulting in being stabbed to death. Amanda's character, however, subverts the horror movie expectations by surviving until the end of the film. Bryan Kohberger is accused of murders. The director, when he found out that Amanda Kohberger was the sister of the guy accused of stabbing a bunch of college students, said, "Are you fucking kidding me? Her brother's that guy? Goddamn, man, holy cow." That's what he said. That's his reaction to hearing that Amanda Kohberger, the sister of Bryan Kohberger, the alleged killer who stabbed a bunch of college students, is like, holy shit, he's related to this girl. What are the odds? What are the fucking odds on that? Oh, completely circumstantial. Devil's advocates, you're an asshole for even bringing it up. You're just talking out your ass for clicks. You're trying to get hits. You're trying to get money. You're making money off of people's pain. America just got a conviction on somebody on largely circumstantial evidence, and you're not an asshole, but I'm an asshole for suggesting that maybe we were lied to about a lot of stuff. I know we were lied to. I've been showing the receipts. Okay. So it says Boone claimed that 2 Days Back was a film that he made as a student and that Amanda was cast after an open audition. I remember her well. He directed the movie. She was very nice. He liked her a lot. That's basically just, again, some receipts for showing that Amanda was indeed in Pennsylvania at that place. I'm going to show you more receipts. Let me get, So let's cover the whole Bryan Kohberger wants to be a Ranger. Wouldn't it be nice if the highlights that I spent all this time highlighting and I was ready to go, they were all highlighted, I could see them, and now that I want to show it live, all my highlights are gone. Was Bryan Kohberger, this is an article that we're going to look at, was Bryan Kohberger in the military Idaho suspect's career history? After the knife sheath was found, we find out that, we're going to look down here a little bit. All right, here we go. Kohberger was pictured training in law enforcement class in high school yearbook in the 10th grade. Remember, he was 17 at the time that 2 days back was filmed with Amanda Kohberger, his sister, about the same age as Brent Kopacka. He's in 10th grade. According to pictures, he's training for law enforcement in the 10th grade. Excerpts from his 2011, same year that 2 days back was shot, with his sister in it. In excerpts from his 2011 Pleasantville Valley High School yearbook, it says Kohberger used the skills that he learned in training law enforcement to help reach his goal to one day serve in the Army Rangers, an elite branch of Special Operations Forces. So again, let's follow the speculative logic of circumstantial rabbit hole. If Brent Kopacka had just got out of the military as a paratrooper in the Army, would have possibly trained with Army Rangers. Now, possibly, if he's into horror films, could have met Amanda Kohberger, who's starring in a horror film. If you're obsessed with horror films and your friends all love horror films and there's somebody in the area filming a horror movie, wouldn't you probably want to be like, oh, look, cool, they're filming a horror movie right where we're at. We're horror movie film fans. Wouldn't you think it's at least possible? For God's sake, is it at least possible in your imagination, if I can prove that these guys were horror film fans, that they might have been interested in a horror film being filmed nearby where they live, and therefore that could have put Brent Kopacka in connection with Amanda Kohberger, who is starring in a horror film being shot right there in their home state where his family's from. Is that so hard for you to make that possible leap? And if he did meet Amanda Kohberger, could he have met a young Bryan Kohberger in high school? And could that have been the inspiration for Bryan Kohberger, like, I want to be a Ranger like that badass someday? Is this so hard for you to even possibly imagine? Or is the only thing that makes sense is that if you learn how to fillet fish, that means you know how to kill 4 people in 8 minutes with a knife and get away with it because you couldn't have some pretty girl? That makes more sense to you. 100% circumstantial evidence, no proof whatsoever. He knew the girls, where he met them, anything like that. But you're going to buy the story about them meeting at Mad Greek restaurant with no receipts. I'm showing you receipts that puts Kopacka's family in Pennsylvania with the Kohberger family and why they could have met and how they could have met. But I'm the asshole here. Now, Brent Kopacka, I want to bring up something more about Brent Kopacka before we get into a bit more. We're not 100% done with receipts, but we're getting close. June 29th, there was a famous video of Brent Kopacka where he's recorded on body cam footage by police officers. He tells them that he's living at a very specific location at Pimlico, at the Pimlico Apartments in Pullman. This article is going to cast doubt into all of that. If you watched the video from the night that Brent Kopacka was shot and killed, let me remind you of a few things. When Brent Kopacka was shot and killed, that apartment video showing Brent Kopacka's apartment, there was no furniture in the apartment. Many people said, what the fuck? There's like no furniture in the apartment. And we were told Brent Kopacka was threatening to kill his roommates. And we all bought that story. Now look at this Substack article where they're talking about some of the details on this. In the 6.5-minute video, this is from an earlier video of Brent Kopacka where he said he was living at Pimlico. It's not the night that he was shot and killed. It was an incident before that. In this 6.5-minute video, you can hear Brent state that he lives at 1455 Northeast Brandy Way at Pimlico. The Pimlico apartments are literally right next door to the Steptoe apartments where Kohberger lived. Or Kohberger, as it says here, Bryan Kohberger. The Steptoe apartments right next door to where Kohberger lives. Okay, now follow the logic. Brent Kopacka in the video says his address is at the Pimlico apartments, which is right next door to the Steptoe apartments where Bryan Kohberger lived. You tell me, Is it that much of a stretch of your freaking imagination that if Brent Kopacka's family comes from Pennsylvania and the Kohbergers come from Pennsylvania, and if they're horror film fans, which I'm still going to show you the receipts on that, and if they ended up together in Pullman, Washington, next door to each other, that's all just a coincidence to you? And when Brent Kopacka is shot and killed and his phone factory wiped, that's all coincidence to you. And when there's a second suspect on the paperwork with Kohberger on the 5th that's been redacted and they don't want you to know about it, that's all completely circumstantial and coincidental. And when they say that they led to the author found a DNA match to 4 brothers in Pennsylvania that's not Kohberger, that's circumstantial that it happens to be that Brent Kopacka has 4 brothers. If you live in that world, tell me if you know any really cool fiction shows that I should watch, because you like fiction and you must be really excellent at it. So give me a good recommendation of a fantastic fiction show because you believe in fiction. The police report from this incident, however, states that he lived at the Coffee House Apartments. The police report. So he says on body cam footage, I'm staying at the Pimlico Apartments, which is right next to where Bryan Kohberger is staying. The police report, however, says that he stayed at the Coffee House Apartments. Brent, and I think it was the Coffee House Apartments where Brent Kopacka will be shot later and killed. In December of 22, it was alleged that Jordan Christian Baker called 911 and stated that he was threatening to shoot me and my roommate. So Jordan Christian Baker is one of the people who said, there's this guy losing his shit. Brent Kopacka is who it was, they said, is threatening to kill his roommates, kill me and my roommates. And the allegations is that Brent Kopacka was a roommate of these individuals. This Substack article is going to say, no, Brent Kopacka was not living there. He just happened to live nearby there. He was not living there. And nobody actually said they were roommates. That was a fabrication made by law enforcement. Maybe. Now, again, I know this is confusing if you haven't seen it before. We're going to watch a clip. We're going to watch a clip before we're done. This is a very long video. We're going to watch a clip from Darren Duncan, friend of Brent Kopacka, telling us about the mysterious missing furniture in Brent Kopacka's room. And when you watch the video of that night that Brent Kopacka was killed, there's no furniture in the entire apartment. That should be a red flag to you, that something's going wrong with this whole story. It was a 3-bedroom apartment. Police claim that Brent Kopacka was the 3rd roommate living there. In the police body cam, it does not appear there was any furniture or anything else in the main living room area that could be seen. Jordan described it as a long gun that supposedly Kopacka had. Police said it was a handgun. So right there, Jordan's saying they're roommates, but there's no indication they ever lived together. There wasn't even any furniture in the apartment. Jordan says he had a long gun. Police recorded it as a handgun. Which one is it? The story doesn't make sense. There's lies going on. There's manipulation going on, but you guys are okay with that if it leads to the conviction of Bryan Kohberger. You don't want to hear about inconsistencies if it sheds doubt or reasonable doubt into the story. Records indicate that Jordan wasn't living at the Coffee House Apartments. So records indicate Jordan wasn't living at the Coffee House Apartments until October 22. So that would have been, okay, October 22 would have been living there at the time because December is when the shooting happened. The 911 call has never been released, but Jordan's statements indicating that he didn't know Kopacka very well or think of him as a friend. So if they're roommates, he doesn't know him very well or he thinks of him as a friend. That's odd. There are a lot of peculiarities and contradictions concerning the December 22 alleged hours. Long police standoff in both body cam and statements by other residents in the complex. One neighbor said that at another time she saw Brent, listen to this. One neighbor said that at another time she saw Brent Kopacka standing outside of the apartment door, that he claimed his brother was taking a shower and that he was waiting for him to finish and let him in. The doors have coded locks and there's no indication that Brent's brother ever lived there. Brent's brother Zach lives in Lewiston, Idaho and works for Rogers Subaru. Brent's brother Zach lives in Lewiston, Idaho. We know that right after the murders, Bryan Kohberger allegedly took a trip down to Lewiston, Idaho. Clarkston, Washington, Lewiston, Idaho area. He took a trip down there. I've alleged why he was going down to Lewiston, Idaho. But again, this story is full of shit. It's all speculation. What we want to pay attention to is Bryan Kohberger's phone pinged off the cell tower that services the house at 1122 King Road residence, and that's good enough. And he may have gone to Mad Greek restaurant one time and may have seen Maddie and may have become obsessed with her and may decided that he couldn't have her. So he may have had to kill 4 people in 8 minutes because he all speculative. And you're okay with that story. I'm losing my fucking mind with this shit. All right. I think I have 2 more documents that I meant to show before I show you the video of Darren Duncan. All right, here's an article I want to focus on. I've got a few articles that are a little out of place, and so it's not as clean as I wanted to. True crime fans seize on the Idaho killings. Their accusations derail lives. So they're going to insult us for being loose with their tongue and making allegations that aren't true, like Brent Kopacka may have known the Kohbergers. That's reckless endangerment of people's lives and complete horseshit. But we can do speculations all day long, like Bryan Kohberger may have met a girl at a restaurant that he may have gone to, but we have no receipts, and may have that. You can do that all day long. But if I show you receipts that the Kopackas came from Pennsylvania, that his mom lived in Pennsylvania at the same time the Kohbergers, I'm an asshole. Do you see the problem with this? Anyways, Duncan, this is Darren Duncan's. Darren Duncan is the best friend on a video that's been aired many, many times, and I'm going to show you a clip of it. Darren Duncan, friend of Brent Kopacka, who says, by the way, I think when law enforcement came there that night, they thought Brent Kopacka was involved in the murders of the Idaho Four. For fuck's sake, listen. His own friend told you, I think the police thought that Brent Kopacka was involved in the Idaho Four murders. I think so too, sir. I think so too. I think he's the other name that's redacted along with Bryan Kohberger. I think they think Brent Kopacka and Bryan Kohberger from Pennsylvania came out here and did the murders together. That's what I think that they thought. I think you're right. Police did think that Brent Kopacka was involved. And yet to this day, I get kicked in the teeth if I mention Brent Kopacka's name or try to put the dots together to you. I'm the asshole. Darren Duncan, his friend, described Kopacka as funny, generous, and caring. They had been fast friends and metalheads since middle school. Kopacka enlisted in the military after high school and was proud of his time with the 82nd Airborne Division, Duncan said, but he had spoken about being scarred by some of his experiences. One online conspiracy theorist went as far as claiming to have found the weapon, a photo of a machete that Duncan had posted. Yes, there's a famous video of a big machete in Brent Kopacka's bedroom or shrine to Brent Kopacka from his friends. There was a big machete with a dog collar tied around it. Why is that important? Because there was a dog that went slayed, missing right around the same time as the murders that was filleted. And that dog's collar looked like, in one video that was shown on Crime Circus by Drip Drop, showed a picture of the machete, a shrine to Brent Kopacka, with what looked like Buddy, the dog's collar, wrapped around the hilt of the machete. That made a lot of sensationalism. That shit's been cleaned up ever since. And now we look like assholes because if we bring it up, we have a hard time finding the receipts. Fortunately, some of us have screenshots, and I have it in a video. If you look at my video called The Horror Game Theory, I think you'll see photos of that machete with the dog collar around it and the story of Buddy, if you can handle the animal abuse part of that story. But again, I'm an asshole for trying to link all this together. Idaho killings were the main topic of the Drunk Turkey Show podcast, where three friends in their 30s analyze information, take calls from listeners, and so on and so on. In one January video, a listener called in to claim that a knife used in the stabbings belonged to Kopacka. In a rambling, confusing list of accusations, she alleged without evidence that the veteran had been in the victim's house before. So again, if it doesn't support your narrative, then we are pieces of shit for talking about it. So somebody comes forth and said, I know Kopacka had that knife that was used in the killing. Kopacka had been in the house before. You can't prove that. You're a piece of shit for talking about it. Yet we can't prove anything because that's what the prosecution said. We can't prove Bryan Kohberger was in the house. We can't place him in the house. You're okay with that. But everybody else is a piece of shit for saying there's a long story that says Brent Kopacka was there and knew those people, had the knife, all these things. Some people say that a warrant was served on Brent Kopacka for that knife the day that he was shot and killed, and that everything else is a cover-up story because they came looking for that knife. Things went wrong. They shot and killed Kopacka, and then they were left with only one other person involved in the crime, which is Kohberger, but they couldn't place him at the house. So they needed a way to place him at the house. In comes the idea, the allegation of planted evidence. Why do I feel like I'm signing my own death warrant as I lay this shit out? I hope to God that doesn't happen for my wife's sake and for mine. I'm not a fan of painful deaths. Anyways, in one January video, okay, so we got that. After several minutes of wide-ranging speculation, the host, Daniel J., remarked, everything that you're saying makes a lot of sense. In a separate video, Jay acknowledged some of the listeners' claims might be false, but added that doesn't mean that there isn't some truth to what she's saying. He later told the Post that he and his co-host used social media photos to verify some of what she said, including that she was the parent of two Washington State University students. Jay added that he believed that she had important information and has a right to share her opinion. Now, in this case, you're only allowed to share this opinion if it supports the mainstream narrative. If you share your opinion otherwise, you're a clickbaiter, you're an asshole trying to make money off of other people's pain. You're only allowed to speculate and put circumstantial evidence together if it leads to the conviction of Bryan Kohberger or the continued belief in the public that he's guilty. That is the only speculation you're allowed to do. Any other speculation, you're an asshole, victim shaming everybody, and you need need to be put in jail for defamation of character, everything else, but it's okay to do the same thing to Bryan Kohberger because that's the narrative we're going with. And so it's okay to speculate until your fucking cows come home, including here's a creepy picture of Bryan Kohberger making a face. Oh my God, that's the eyes of a killer. Can't you see it? That's the eyes of a killer. That's okay. You can do that all day long. But if I put together receipts like this, we find ourselves not only tracking these rumors down, but trying to quell them, but also we see our tips come in and are geared more towards rumor and not facts that have been put out, says Roger Lanier, Captain Roger Lanier from MPD, right? So anyways, they shame, of course, anybody that comes up with any kind of theories that is not the official narrative. That's the point of that. I feel like there's one more document I don't want to miss, but I feel like I'm going to miss it, damn it. It was in this stack. All right, good enough for that. Let's just finish this up because I'm going long. I'm at an hour already. I want to close these tabs. Let's just show the video, a clip from a video that I made. This is a clip from my own video quite a while ago. When was this shot? 7 months ago. 7 months ago. It's called Devil's Briefcase. It was an idea I was going to do for a podcast called The Devil's Briefcase, Episode 3, The Horror Film Theory. This is where I'm talking about the possible connections between Brent Kopacka, Amanda Kohberger in the film 2 days back, how they were all horror film fans. You're going to watch this clip from this interview in which you see Darren Duncan, best friend of Brent Kopacka, speculating about what happened that night. Watch behind Darren Duncan, who's going to be here on the left side. I'm going to have to remove this from screen for a moment and add it back to screen with sound so that we get sound on this. So we're going to add, let's remove this, stop screen share. And then we're going to go screen sharing. And then we're going to screen share this right here. That should give us sound on this video when I play it. We're going to put it on screen. There you go. Add to stage. All right. So we're going to play this video. I'm going to make it full screen. By the way, the timestamp, if you want to get to right to this area, 40 minutes and 51 seconds into this video. I'm going to play my own video and some of my analysis to refresh. And again, on the right-hand side of the screen over here, you're going to see Darren Duncan, best friend of Brent Kopacka, talking about that night. Look behind him carefully. Everything behind him is horror film memorabilia. Masks from horror films, famous pictures from horror movies, all kinds of horror stuff. This is in Darren Duncan's room. Darren Duncan's a horror film fan. He even said at one point, just because my group of friends, including Brent Kopacka, or horror film fans, doesn't mean we're murderers. That was the implication he makes. He admits, I'm a horror fan film. They're all horror film films. So is Brent Kopacka. So again, interject this speculative notion that the horror fan films may have met Amanda Kohberger starring in a horror film in Pennsylvania. All right, let's put this to the test on a full screen thing. I had it full screen. All right, are you ready? Hopefully we have sound. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a fairly significant portion of an interview on the TREV 757 podcast here on the live stream with Darren Duncan, best friend of Brent Kopacka. You can see that up in the byline, up on the top. Brent, now I want to point out a few things. This is going to go towards the horror film theory that you've been waiting, like where the hell's the horror film stuff? So look behind Darren Duncan on the wall. You'll see a ton of horror film memorabilia. There's pictures from various horror movies. There's horror masks on the wall. There's the Scream mask up on the wall. Different actors from various horror movies. Saw images up here. They are big into horror films. Darren Duncan is into horror films, and by extension, we can believe that Brent Kopacka was into horror films. There is this shot that we're going to show in a little bit, a shocking shot of a memorial set up to Brent Kopacka, and the memorial set up for in his room of a whole bunch of horror memorabilia. Now, by the way, I just want to stop for a minute. Not that I have to stop my own video to avoid copyright because it's my own video kind of thing, but I used to say Kopacka, and I think it's Kopacka. I got Kopacka's pronunciation from Kopacka himself on a body cam footage of that earlier thing we talked about where he said he was at the Pimlico Apartments. They asked him, what's your name? And he says, Brent Kopacka. And he pronounced it Kopacka. I used to say Kopacka, so that's why you're hearing me pronounce it different ways in the video, just in case you want to bust my balls about another fucking thing that's not important instead of paying attention to the details. All right, let's go back to this video. Just like this, pictures of It, the clown from the Stephen King thing, and from other horror movies, including the Scream mask again, and we're going to see a horrific story and image about Buddy the dog. If you haven't heard about this before, it's a horrific, sad story, but it shows these guys were all into horror films. They were big into horror films. There's another surprise coming, if you're not already aware of it, about the Kopackas and horror films. So there's a weird connection. This is all starting to tie in now. The theme of this entire episode, the horror film connection. Darren Duncan, best friend of Brent Kopacka, allegedly, who's giving an interview about what happened that night. I want to play a fairly significant portion of this interview. I'll make some fingered motions or whatever of places that I want you to pay attention to. But it's not only what he says, but what he doesn't say that's going to be important. So pay attention to this interview from Darren Duncan. And I'll try to maybe snip out some parts if it gets a little lengthy.
Social butterfly here saying what really happened that day. Was he really freaking out? I don't know. I wasn't there, but God damn it, I wish I was.
And if you're uncomfortable let me know.
I got nothing to hide. I'm not scared of any of these people. There's anything that these people, I've heard it all before.
Shout out to my brother. Got you.
If you're going to be an asshole or call me a liar, then like that's on you. I'm not here to fucking fix you. I'm not here to convince you.
Right.
I don't fucking care. At the end of the day, you can say whatever you want and you can still go to sleep at night, but just think about the shit that the way you make me feel or the family feels when you say those things. But I want to answer that person's question. What happened that day, I do not know because I was not there. And with all of my heart, I truly wish that I was there because I think that if I was there the night that Brent got killed by the cops, I assume that's what she's talking about, right?
Yeah, I think so.
If I was there, I believe Brent would still be alive. And what I honestly think happened that night is I know that Brent did not like his roommates. They did not get along. And whether it was because he, played his music too fucking loud or whatever, I don't know why. But I know that he didn't really like them very much. He didn't like anybody on the West Coast for that matter that he met really. But what I think happened is they got into an argument. Brent.
Stop for a minute. He didn't like anybody on the West Coast from what I know. Once again, circumstantial evidence. Does that suggest he's an East Coast guy? He didn't like anybody on the West Coast from what I remember, right? Didn't like anybody on the West. Why would you say on the West Coast, if you're born and raised in Lewis and Idaho, always lived over there, why would you say the West Coast? Again, indications, circumstantial asshole. Right? Yeah, you can't prove that they're from Pennsylvania. But what I can say is even his best friend saying you didn't like anybody on the West Coast. Why speculate the West Coast? Let's go on.
Was probably drunk. He was probably drinking, fucking playing some music too loud or something. They got into a fucking argument. Mm-hmm. Brent could have said something along the lines of, get out of my room or I'll fucking kill you, or shut the fuck up or I'll fucking kill you. Something along those lines, I think. I'm not saying that he grabbed a gun and waved it around the living room, was going to shoot everybody. That's not what I think happened. Mm-hmm. I think that him and his roommates did not like each other. They were probably looking for a reason to get him out. And the fact that they got into a big fight, he might have said, I'll fucking kill you or something. They call the cops and they're like, cool, this is a way to get him out. And I don't know if they were on campus or close to campus or whatever, but being in a situation like that with a gun involved, especially in this country, they're going to take it extremely serious.
Right.
So the cops show up. I also think due to proximity in distance and in time, I think that since the murders happened about 20 miles away, about a month before, I think that the cops in their mind may have been like, fuck, what if this is that kid that killed those people? Like, what if it's that?
And again, right there, Darren Duncan, best friend of Brent Kopacka, is saying, I think the law enforcement officers thought because the proximity of Moscow, Idaho to Pullman, Washington, just 15 miles away, whatever, that they thought, fuck, what if this guy's involved with the murders? I think they did think that he was involved with the murders. I think he was early identified as possibly have done the murders with Bryan Kohberger. That's my guess right now, that they had those two individuals on their radar. These two guys that came out from Pennsylvania and ended up in Pullman, Washington, and then this murder happens. I think they were on their radar already, and they were thinking, fuck, what if this guy who we're getting called in is the guy that killed those kids over in Moscow, Idaho? Listen.
That guy. Mm-hmm. And so they go in full defense mode. They talked, well, actually, there was quite a bit of a lack of communication. From what I was told, they did try to give him a phone to speak with them, like a negotiator or whatever. He would not talk to them. And after 7 or 8 hours, they decided to shoot him. And I think that after the fact, I think the cops fucked up that night. I think they dropped the ball and it completely landed on mine and the family's foot. And I think they fucked up. And I think
And again, I'm making a big deal out of that. I agree. I think the cops fucked up. I think they fucking killed one of their primary suspects, and they were left with only one of the two suspects that they had identified for the murders in Idaho. And they fucked up. They killed one of them, and it was a big clusterfuck at that point. And so there had to be a cover up, which is why, which you're going to find out from Darren Duncan himself, is they factory wiped Brent Kopacka's phone, so there would be no connection between him and Kohberger, and then went with the lone knifeman story, even though his skills in knife fighting is filleting a fish at a place that he didn't stay long enough to learn how to fillet fish. But anyways, we're going to keep going.
That after they killed him, they were like, oh shit, this wasn't who we thought it was. It was just a kid with PTSD.
Remember, the judge in the case, literally when referring to Bryan Kohberger, slipped and said Brent Kopacka, called Kohberger Brent Kopacka. Do you think that, am I an asshole? Am I an asshole? You really, I'm just speculating asshole, right? No connection between these two guys. They don't know each other. They didn't both have family back in Pennsylvania. They both didn't end up within a block of each other or whatever, 2 miles if you take one thing of each other in Pullman, Washington. That's complete coincidence if those two guys did end up from Pullman, Washington and Pennsylvania. That's a complete coincidence. That they're into horror films and Bryan Kohberger's sister was in a horror film. All that's coincidence. All that shit. I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole every day and twice on Sunday. But you know what? If Bryan Kohberger goes over to a small town of Moscow, Idaho, where there's relatively small number of cell towers, and if a cell tower pings off his phone that happens to also ping off the house at 1122 residence, that's good enough to place him as the killer of those 4 girls.
We fucked up. His room was empty when the family went in. His room was fucking empty, and his cell phone was on the kitchen counter, and it was factory reset. I think that the cops I think they made a mistake.
I can't tell you how much that should set your alarm bells off. His best friend, I think they fucked up. I think they thought he was involved in the Idaho 4 murders. I think they accidentally killed him, and then they emptied his room of all its belongings, and they factory reset his phone. Now, he doesn't flat out say the cops factory reset the phone and emptied the room, but what he did say was what I just said. I think they thought he was part of that crime. I think they thought he killed those kids or could have killed those kids. They fucked up when they killed him, and then his room was emptied of furniture and his phone was factory reset. It takes a minute for the interviewer to catch what he just said about the factory resetting thing. Watch the reaction when he gets to that.
Covered their tracks. That's what I think happened. But that is just my opinion. I was not there. And as I said, I wish I was there, because if I was there, I could have talked him down. Whatever was on the other side of the door, I could have been like, dude, it's fine. It's cool. Fuck them. Let's just leave. Or if the cops did show up, if I could have talked to him on the phone or something, I could have said, go outside, get arrested. We'll get you out tomorrow. You might be in a lot of trouble. You might get arrested and do some jail time, but you'll fucking be alive. And he would be alive today if I had the opportunity to speak to him or if I was there. But as far as the question goes, what happened that night, I do not know, because I was not there. And I really fucking wish that I was.
Man, I'd hate for you to carry
I
that.
do not know why his phone was factory reset, to answer somebody's question. That's a mystery to the family and myself. We don't know why his room was empty. There was nothing in his room.
His phone was factory reset?
His phone was factory reset, and it was on the kitchen counter.
That's weird, bro.
It's super fucking weird. And
I'm sorry. That's weird.
It's super fucking weird. It's super fucking weird. Right. Yeah. People, his phone is factory reset. That's weird. It's super fucking weird. What are they trying to cover? I'll tell you what I think speculative that they're trying to cover. Kopacka and Kohberger were on their radar before the evidence was put into the house, placing Kohberger there, because they thought that the 2 guys might have been involved in it from way earlier in this investigation, but they couldn't prove it. Then they fucked up when they killed Kopacka, and they were left with 1 guy. Maybe, as I said from one of my first videos ever, Kohberger could have simply been the getaway driver. He could have literally brought Kohberger to the house that night, because there's indication that Kopacka didn't have a car. Kohberger could have went by the apartments, picked up Kopacka, took him to 112 King Road residence. Kopacka could have gone in there and did know with knife fighting skills how to kill 8 people in 4 minutes. That's a possibility. I still think it's more than one person that did it. But even the prosecution said that they thought there was a possibility of more than one person that did it. Even the defense brought in witnesses saying that they think it was more than one person that did it. So if it was the 2 guys But here's the problem. They killed one of them, and then there's not any DNA evidence to place the other guy at the scene. So what do you need to do? You need to place him at the scene. So what do? You lean on confidential informant Molly McMichael and say, you're going to say you saw him there that night. But yet when her testimony falls under pressure, when you realize Molly didn't see Bryan Kohberger there. In fact, the description she gives is of a police officer that she sees that night, an undercover police officer running around the neighborhood. She sees that guy. She does not see Bryan Kohberger. How do you guys all miss it? Why does nobody care? It seems like Molly McMichael did not see Bryan Kohberger there, but she was prepared to testify. They were going to put her on the stand and testify that she saw Bryan Kohberger there. Why? Because the prosecution desperately needed to find a way to place Kohberger there. I believe, and my personal feeling is that the prosecution, law enforcement did believe Kohberger was involved, but they couldn't prove it. And so they needed to do anything they could to prove it, including bringing a false witness forward. In my opinion, they were going to bring a false witness forward to put him there at the house, and they were going to plant DNA at the house because they couldn't put him there. And at the end of the day, they weren't going to try and show the DNA evidence because they knew they were going to be in trouble if they tried to show it. So at the end of the day, what Bill Thompson said before the sentencing, we can't place Bryan Kohberger at the house. We can't prove that he was there. We can only place him near the house. Well, if he was the getaway driver, that's why you could only place him near the house. He brought the killer there. That's one scenario. Or maybe he wasn't even there. Keep in mind, there's a lot of people bust my nuts because you think Bryan Kohberger is 100% innocent. And that's certainly on the table here. What I can tell you is I don't believe that they have proof that Bryan Kohberger did it. And they said that. We don't have any proof that Kohberger did it. And yet in America, most people are going to go down saying it's proven now that Bryan Kohberger did it because he pled guilty. But the deck was stacked against him. Now, I think we've gone a really long time. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to show you the buddy thing. I'm trying to get to it here. Yeah, nearby resident's dog was skinned shortly before the University of Idaho slayings. Let's see if I can play a piece of this. We're going to talk about Buddy the dog, and this is horrible. I'm an animal lover. This is a difficult story for me. I mean, it should be difficult enough that it's human beings, but I also have a really soft spot for animals. And so this story is disturbing, but it brings in, again, the whole horror film / Kopacka connection. This happened nearby residents. Dog was skinned shortly before the University of Idaho murders, according to a story on November 21st, 2022. So the murders were on November 13th, right? 2022. This is November 22nd. New York Post article. Nearby resident's dog was skinned shortly after the Idaho murders. And we'll see if I can zoom just a hair in for you. The couple's dog was killed and skinned just 3 miles away from where the university. I don't think, for the sake of this video, we don't need brutally slaughtered in their home. Leading locals to fear a connection between and Kernodle were stabbed to death in their off-campus home 3 miles away. On Sunday, police said they still prove. So, here it is. So I think I show some pictures. Buddy in his blue collar right there. Yeah. You can watch this. Someone was targeted. Later, they said maybe all of them were targeted. I believe, in my theory, Kaylee was targeted and possibly her two best friends, Xana. I think Ethan was in his blue collar right there, right? There's Buddy in his blue collar on the right-hand side. Blue collar right there. And there's Buddy again, but that's kind of a very similar picture. So you can see Buddy in his blue collar is a very common theme. Now let's get to the really twisted stuff. Now, I wouldn't put this in the realm of speculation, but it's hard to prove. So I'm not going to say it's verified, and I'm not going to say it's speculation. If you look into, and it was a YouTuber, Crime Circus did a great video on it. I'm not going to show his exact take because I want to give my own opinions on it. But here you see some clips. This image that is taken that you can see here, and I'm going to put it up a little bit bigger. So let's go back actually to the previous tab. Here you show Buddy right there, the dog with the blue collar. What they're showing is there's a thing online that shows a little shrine to Brent Kopacka in his room that is blown up as a close-up, but they wanted to compare Buddy's collar to what you see in here. What you see in here is going to be... right. So you saw Buddy's collar next to this. This is the machete with what appears to be a blue collar, shredded and cut off from the dog that was filleted. Look behind, Pennywise the clown. There's a mask of Scream up on the counter. Again, all the horror film memorabilia. This is Brent Kopacka's shrine to Brent Kopacka with the machete and what appears to be the dog's collar. Again, all I'm trying to suggest at the end of the day, let me go back full screen to finish this because we've been at this way too long and I need to cut you guys some slack. Go watch that video of mine on the horror movie theory. Is just this. I get it. All of that is circumstantial. I still cannot prove. Thank God for my own safety and my own life. Thank God I can't prove to you Brent Kopacka and Kohberger knew each other, that I can't connect that final dot. If I did, and I'm the only person who can prove it, I will be a dead man, I'm pretty sure. So if I do prove it, I'm going to make sure like a million people know it at the same time. So I'm not the only one who knows it, because you don't want to be the only person holding that information, or you're a dead man if you believe that people are trying to cover stuff up. That's the missing piece. That's the $1 million question, putting Kopacka and Kohberger directly together. But I have got a ton of circumstantial evidence, and trust me, it's a hell of a lot better than Kohberger may have eaten at the Greek restaurant, Mad Greek restaurant, which Maddie may have been there when he did, but there's no receipts, and may have become obsessed with her, and then may have decided he had to kill 4 people because he couldn't have her because she was too pretty. What kind of ridiculous ass logic is that strain that seems to have been accepted hook, line, and sinker by most of Americans? And yet what I just showed you receipts is garbage speculation. And furthermore, as the summary back to the very first slide we started with, to the person that said, DA, I hate to break it to you, but you're completely wrong. No Kopackas ever lived in Pennsylvania. You're wrong. His mom is Darcy Nixon, who I just proved to you was living in Pennsylvania at the same time as the Kohbergers. His father is John Kopacka, which I also proved to you was in Pennsylvania at the same time. So who's the asshole? Why am I constantly getting kicked in the teeth and having to prove to you that, and it's just a story. I'm just telling you, this is just what makes sense. But you're gonna nitpick everything I say. You're gonna nitpick everything I say and tell me I'm just coming up with stories for clickbait, and that the story that Bryan Kohberger, and I don't want to repeat it for the 40 millionth time, all that speculative bullshit, you know what it is, all the speculative bullshit, all the circumstantial bullshit, that to you is foregone conclusion Bryan Kohberger was the killer. But when I put together the receipts showing you all of this stuff, I'm an asshole and a clickbaiter. Chew on that shit for a while. Thanks for listening.